Welcome to the Hope-Filled Romantic, where faith and fiction meet real-life love stories. I'm your host, Heather Tabers, and each week we'll sit down with Christian romance authors to talk about the swoon-worthy relationships in their books and the sometimes messy, always meaningful love stories in real life. This girl believes that every love story, real or fictional, begins with hope. So cue the heart flutters. The next chapter begins now. KyLee Woodley teaches preschool at a lab school in Texas where she lives with her husband of 18 years and their 3 teenage children. Having been raised in the Pacific Northwest and spent part of her adult life in Texas, she has a deep respect for American values. She grew up in an impoverished area and began ministering to homeless, drug addicted, and desperate people while in her teens. As a result, she feels a deep sense of concern for society's unloved. This comes through in her stories, enriched with historical detail that shows how loving the unlovely is a timeless need. On weekends, KyLee co hosts and produces the Historical Bookworm Show, a steadily growing author interview podcast for history lovers and readers of historical fiction. KyLee, good morning. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me on, Heather. I am so excited to chat with you about love and real life love stories and this book, The Bounty Hunter's Surrender.
Yes, I'm so excited to talk to you about that. Tell us a little bit about the Bounty Hunter Surrender and what inspired that story.
Well, The Bounty Hunter's Surrender is book two of my Outlaw Hearts series. The main it started with Miss Aubrey Willett. She is Jesse's sister. Jesse is the hero from book one. And there's some kind of twist at the end that involve Aubrey in book one in a way that I just thought, I'll bet they'd like to know more about her. And I really kind of got a glimpse of her in the final couple scenes because she's in the first scene, but she's the first scene of the book, but she's very different in those last two or three scenes of the book. And that, like, she's in like maybe she's in four scenes. That's it for the whole book.
Okay.
And just some of her, just sort of the playfulness between her and her brother. I got to know her in those few scenes, and so I was like, she's definitely going to be the
She needs her
heroine
own
for
book.
book two. Yeah, and put in some mystery there, and as far as Nathan, the handsome, roguish bounty hunter, for him, I was looking at an element of outlaw to go with one of the themes of this series. And the I didn't want to, because Lorraine, heroine of book number one, was so like she was a bandit. Like she was in the middle, like you see her in robberies and you see her like very much in that element. And then looking at Aubrey, her husband, who's passed on, was not a very good guy, but he also ended up in prison. And so I was like, I really think that for Aubrey, that she needs someone who, yes, maybe has an element of outlaw in his past and some things he's grappling with, but that is ultimately, a good guy and a way to kind of bring that in, his past. He has some things going on there. But then that bounty hunter element. And it just kind of took off from there. I think anytime that you start to brainstorm a story and get to know the characters and kind of think about what they need and what stakes and what's at stake for him. And yeah, he has a niece, so I wasn't planning on the two babies being in the story, not at all. Aubrey was pregnant in book number one. And then for Nathan to have the niece that he's adopted, and who needs to, basically be rescued from the foundling asylum that was in San Francisco at the time that has a sort of dark history. I tried not to go too much into. And so it's just what he needed. He needed a baby. And yeah, that's kind of how that came about. There's a little mystery with some things that Nathan is originally searching for. He's working for someone he shouldn't be working for. And you see him in the first couple scenes and some of the people he's associated with from book one, at least one person. And it's like, oh, so this isn't good. But he comes around.
Oh, good. That's what we like in a hero. We like a hero that's got a little bad boy in him, but comes around to be a
Yeah,
good guy.
I think so.
Well, you mentioned that Aubrey was married to a not so good guy. I know
Yeah.
your cover talks about her being in an abusive marriage. So, what message do you hope women who've experienced emotional or spiritual abuse, what message do you hope they take away from this story?
That their identity is found in God, and that after going through something like that, an abusive situation where for Aubrey, her identity, she lost her identity because the man she was with just wore her down. At one point in the book, she has this thought where she's tired of apologizing for things that aren't her fault because she was made to feel that way so much by her deceased husband. And that it takes time. And I try and show that with Aubrey, that I didn't want her to just like be one of those, be a female figure who just like busted out of this relationship and is all independent and amazing. And she is amazing, but she grows and you see her being challenged and noticing her body reacting to a situation that reminds her of a prior abusive situation that she was in, and then seeing her take steps to work through that. And she does that throughout the book, and she just gets stronger and stronger and stronger. And by not denying what happened, even though it's scary facing those things for her,
Yes.
but just taking those steps. And I tried to bring in, I know that our heroes are often they're the hero of the story, but I
Yes.
realized that she needed her dad because her
Mm,
mom's passed on. And so I brought her dad in, and because he sees her like he's known her all her life. And so he sees her as beautiful, capable, just smart, intelligent, all the things that she forgot she was. And in a way, I hope that because not everyone has a great supportive dad, but for
right.
me, he kind of symbolizes God and the way that
Yes.
he sees us. And so that's what for women who have experienced trauma, abuse, whether, mental, physical, verbal, that they'll kind of catch on to those themes. I think they will. I think that they're authentic enough because of my history. They're authentic enough and that they will be encouraged by just having the victory over that, but that it's a process and that is okay. It takes time. It's not something you just, flip a switch and you're just all better all of a sudden and your body just forgets everything you went through and isn't reacting. That's just not reasonable. It's okay that it takes time.
Absolutely. And I love that you brought up the point about her needing to find her identity in
Yeah.
Christ. I think as women, we especially struggle with our identity. We have from the beginning of time. And
Mm,
today we have even more places and people telling us who we should be. We have social media,
yes.
we have movies, we have magazines telling us who we
Mm,
are. And we struggle with that. And so I love that you bring that up with your character. I think especially if you're tied to someone who's abusive, they can really tell you who you are in a way that is so absolutely untrue. And you
yeah.
begin to lose yourself thinking you are those things. You are less than, you are not worthy, you are whatever those things are that he might have told you. So I love that you pointed that out, that finding her identity in Christ. Is what propels her forward in that healing, and it's something that we all need to remember, whether we're in abusive marriage or not. Whatever we're going through, just remembering our identity is such a
Mhm.
key and important thing for us as Christians, as women.
I agree. I agree. And God made us all so different. It's okay if you don't want to go out and garden and get your hands dirty. It's okay if you'd rather be behind a desk than cooking in the kitchen and up with a
Yes.
newborn. It's okay to be you and
Yes.
to, fully be in the identity that God has given you and use the talents and strengths that He has just put in you biologically. You don't have to be, you know, a supermodel. You don't have to be a stay-at-home mom. You don't have to be a hardworking beast of a mom or beast of a of a woman. You get to be you, and it's really great to play into those strengths.
Yeah, because at
I
the
don't
end of
know.
the day, any of those other things can be stripped away from us. Our
Yeah,
husbands can be taken away, our
it's
children can
true.
be taken away, our jobs can be taken away. So at the end of the day, when everything else is gone, who are we in God's eyes? And I love
Hmm.
that. I love that thought of just being his daughter, just being who
Mhm.
he called us to be with those strengths and those talents and those passions and those quirks, all of it together.
Absolutely.
So let's move on to Nathan. Nathan is, like you said, a bounty hunter with a troubled past. And I take it that he feels a little unworthy of love because of his past mistakes. So, how does his journey reflect the kind of redemption we can find in Christ?
Nathan, it takes a little bit longer actually for him to
Mm.
heal than it did for Aubrey. I didn't realize that until I just read through it recently when because I had some space, some time away from the book. And his journey, I mean, it's definitely a painful one, and it's one where he's constantly uh, doubting himself. He feels very unworthy, and also like anything, he's just going to ruin everything. And so for him, his redemption and ultimately his surrender that comes towards the end of the book is that he has to trust other people to, in the end, there's a major crisis, and he is in a position where he cannot go out and rescue. And that was really hard for me because the rescue scene is just one of my favorites to read
Yes.
and to write. But then looking at him and what he needed and just making it authentic, I was like, that's not what he needs. And it's not the way that when I was writing it, it just kept going this direction where he wouldn't be able to be there. And so he is still very plays a significant role in the rescue itself because of his intelligence and his intuitiveness and planning and whatnot. But he ultimately has to surrender that baby, his future with Aubrey, his future career. Because he has a great opportunity there, and just like ultimately, he has to surrender everything to God and just be like, God, whatever happens, I'm choosing to be okay, and I'm not going to go back to keeping everyone at arm's length and compromising what the Bible says is right, because I'm so ashamed of my mistakes. Like here I am, and I'm broken. But he has to get to that point where even, like being broken and not having the power to go out and defend the ones he loves, where he trusts God. And so I think that was sort of on his very long road of self-doubt and backpedaling. He did a little bit more backpedaling than I thought he would. Um, that he reaches a point where, he can trust God. But it comes with accepting his failures because that's what he was running from. So I hope that's a long answer, but
No, that's perfect. It is about surrender for all of us. And so to see, I think for men especially, they rely on themselves, they rely on their skills,
yeah.
they rely on their intellect, and to be put in a position where you have to trust someone else, and ultimately trust God. That's a big test of our faith. So I can't wait to read and see how Nathan handles it. How do you balance when you're writing these strong romantic plots? How do you balance that with the spiritual themes? Is it difficult to weave them into your stories, or do you think they go together seamlessly?
I I don't really plan the spiritual as much. I've noticed that when I start to plan a book, because I usually start at the beginning and just get some real basics that I need about like the characters and the setting and, trials and things they need to overcome. And I may see something in my personal devotion time and prayer time, or, when I'm at church, something my pastor is preaching, and I'll be like, oh, that is just like so and so, like this character. And so I'll write that down. And I've noticed that as I move through the book, um, that Bible verses that are relevant and things that I would say, like my kids are like, you're always quoting the Bible, Mom. I'm like, you're welcome. Because like that's just it, my parents and uh they worked really hard. They just loved God so much and they worked really hard to teach me the Bible. And so as those verses, they just come out in my characters, in their thoughts, the things that they remember. And so that's really how the spiritual themes play in. And I believe too, romance in its essence is a reflection of Christianity. of God, of Jesus, redeeming the church,
Absolutely.
and that sacrifice. And so I think that this, whatever your spiritual theme and your romantic plot, I think they're very close, more than we probably even realize. And so it's thank God, because I do so much planning on other things and so much historical research that I really do trust him to work a lot on that part. And it's usually, what is in my heart. Sometimes the struggles I'm having with come up in my characters, and so, yeah, I don't know what to tell you. Just make sure when you're writing that you are reading your Bible every day and praying so that, what you are, as you're taking in God's word and as it's filling you and affecting what you're thinking, it just goes right into your story. So,
Absolutely. I heard someone say one time that if you're trying to find a way to insert God into your life, then you're not living with him. If you're abiding in him,
Mhm.
you don't have to try to bring him in. He's already there. You're already
Yeah.
walking with him. You're already talking with him. You're already immersed in him. So I love that for you. It just flows seamlessly into your writing because that's where your thoughts are and that's where your heart is. And it'll be fun to read in your story and see just how your heart is poured out. For your heart for God is poured out into your story. And speaking of your story, you have offered to tell us a little bit about your own love story, which is one of my favorite things, is learning about how people met and how they fell in love. So tell me a little bit about how you met your husband.
So people are usually horrified when I describe how I met my husband, because we have an age gap, and so I was 15 when I met him, and I was going to a private school at our church, and he was part of a mission team who had come to the church to do some street ministry and just to minister to the homeless, and um, so I went into school, and our pastor pulled me aside. We had something to talk about having to do with something unrelated, and and then he was telling me he was one of those pastors who like he just was always on fire for God, and so of course he started talking about how he God had a plan for me, and God has a plan for our church, and that I needed keep the faith and don't be discouraged. And he's like, in fact, there's someone I want you to meet. And so he called in this man, and I had walked past him in the church because our school was in the church. And there's this guy sitting in the front pew with like seven coats on, and he's like all hunched up and he's bent down. And I was like, well, maybe he's like a homeless guy who's praying. So he's from Texas. And this is the
Oh.
beginning of our raining season in Washington, and he was freezing. So cold. And so he comes in and he's like all bundled up. And our pastor introduced us, and he was just like, "Hi, Kylie. It's good to meet you. How you doing?" Uh and I was extremely shy at that age. I was 15, and so I was like, "I'm fine." I don't you're a grown up. I don't want to talk to you.
And how old
Um
was
eh,
he?
he was 21, I think.
Okay.
So so there's 6 years between us. That he was 21, and so I was just like, I need to get to school. And he was like, I noticed you have on just a jacket. Like, aren't you cold? Like it was basically a hoodie that zipped up, and I was like, no, I'm fine. So a couple, and then I didn't know, but at the time, our pastor, he had asked for my husband to pray about coming to be the youth leader. And my husband is just, oh, he's a diehard Texan through and through. He loves where he's from, very deep roots. Very close to his family. And so he was like, "Ugh, I'll pray. I'll pray about it. Like, what else can I do? Like, it's not gonna
Right.
happen, but I'll pray." And he prayed, and God told him to go. And so he packed up and went to Washington, and he was actually my youth minister for a couple years. And then I kind of strayed from the church, and I was just always working. And my dad had a rule where I had to go to church at least once a week. So I'd go once a week. And yeah, at one point in time, though, I was at a friend's house, and he happened to be there. And I had gotten older because I always saw him as an old guy. Like it wasn't love at first sight. Like I liked boys and he was definitely a man. And anyway, so once I was older, I saw him and he was with some friends and they were actually skateboarding and he had on like a snap-on t-shirt and I was like, "Oh, Lonnie's kind of hot." But I didn't do like, I don't know. I had like very strict rules for myself. Even, as a young woman, I was just like as far as dating and I was like, I'm just not gonna date. I need to take care of this and I'm not close enough to God. I was always like, I'm not close enough to God. Like my pastor's wife would be like, "KyLee, could you take care of the projections in the church? During music, could you just put them up there?" And I was like, I really don't think that I'm close enough in my walk with God to do that. She was like, "Well, honey, okay, honey. Like, are you doing something?" And she's like, "Well, just remember that none of us are perfect."
Just run the
Um,
slides.
so that we just ended up being a friend, like having a friendship, and we ended up in groups of friends. And so during that time, we went out to the Quinault Rainforest. It's Quinault Lake there. It's on the Native American Quinault Indian Reservation in Washington, and we drove the loop and looked at like this ancient old spruce that's 300 years old or whatever. And he was helping me, and he kept holding my hand to like help me climb up the tree and things like that. And there was something there. So
It always
after
starts with that holding of the hand.
yeah, so and it just kind of developed from there. We had a couple of really serious conversations. I was not of an age to drink, but like that was one of my something that I felt very strongly about is that I and my husband, would not drink when I was married. And so he was which he's not like a drinker, but he was like, okay, that's, like I'm like no toast at weddings. Like I was very specific. And I guess we I kept having these conversations, and I noticed we felt the same way about missions. We felt the same way about church, the Bible, God, politics. Thank goodness. He was really into sports, and I didn't know anything about sports, so we couldn't like root for different teams. So I was like, well, that's good. And then, yeah, eventually he proposed. No ring, just we were out in a garden behind my dad's house, and he was like, "God's just made it very clear to me that you're the woman I'm supposed to spend
Hmm.
my life with." And he was in ministry at the time, and so that was kind of a scary commitment, but I said yes, and we'll have 20 years in January, so just 4 months away.
Oh, congratulations. That's
Thank
wonderful.
you.
You'd said, that when you tell your story that people are often surprised and that you have an age difference. My husband is actually 21 years older than me.
Oh,
So,
wow.
and I didn't know he was that much older when I met him. So it's so funny. I love hearing people's stories and especially the ones that seem unlikely to work out.
Yeah.
A girl in high school meeting uh, a homeless looking missionary. You don't expect that to turn out.
Oh.
So those are my favorite stories. How would you say your love story has helped you or has influenced you as you're writing these love stories in your books?
I would say that it's helped me a lot, especially since, and this is just me, and probably because I met my husband so when I was so young, I have very little experience with with dating, and so it's just him and he's very he's just very sacrificial. I can't
Mm.
even explain it. When my coworkers and my friends are around him, and just the way that he treats me, he is just very devoted. In the beginning of our marriage, he kind of struggled a little because he came from a very manly house with many brothers and so he did not want to give the impression that he was whipped. And so much so that like he helped me with the kids once at a Thanksgiving dinner, helped me serve up their dishes. And one of his brothers was like, "You're whipped." And like his face turned really red. He was still pretty young then. We were all young, and his face turned really red. And I'm standing there with like our kids are really close together. So I'm like, I have an infant and a 2-year old. Like,
I
this
just
is
need
not whip.
help.
This is helping your kids. But yeah, so he's just been very devoted and also very he's a protector. And that comes out in my, with the male heroes that I've written. Only two of them are published now, but I have a whole bunch hidden away like on the files on my computer. And so I think every love story that I write is, I mean, it's a love story, about us, really. Like I put I have the imaginary characters and the settings and everything, but I mean, basically, I'm writing the two of us. One of my kids said, and I have an 18-year-old, 16-year-old, and 15-year-old, and they're like, one of them was like, I'm not going to read your stories because you said that the guy and the girl are just you and dad, and that's weird. And I was like, oh, whatever. We only kiss. Like, there are only like two kisses in the book. Knock it off. But yeah, and so definitely our love story has um influenced the way that I write romance. So much so that like sometimes my daughter, we would be reading something together that I had written and she was like, oh, this guy's just like daddy. It's so cute.
Aw. I love it.
So,
My last
yeah.
manuscript, my heroine had two different heroes that were after her, and you don't find out until the end which one she chooses. So it was a lot of fun
Oh,
writing that. But
yeah.
I asked my husband to read through it. I actually wrote from both male POVs. And so I wanted to make sure that my men had a strong voice, that I wasn't writing like a woman, that their dialogue was manly. And
Yes.
um, one of them was very much like my husband, and the other one was a little bit like my husband, like took parts of him, but
Yeah.
one of them was very much my husband. And my friends who read it immediately identified which one was him. So I asked my husband to read it, and I said, "Who do he read a few chapters. I said, "Who do you want her to end up with?" And he was like, "Oh, not that guy. That guy's such a jerk. That guy this." And I'm like, "That's the one that's you." And he was like, "No, no."
Aw.
And I was like, "He's not a jerk. He's just very strong and opinionated." He's like, "Am I like that?" I was like, "You're strong and opinionated. You're not a jerk."
Yeah,
So it's fun to use what we know and who we love and put that in our stories.
definitely.
What have you learned about forgiveness or trust in your own relationship that you've seen echoed in your stories?
I think that like learning to forgive in my personal life and especially my relationship with my husband is something that carries down into the stories. I wish I could say there was a like huge forgiveness element. There is overall in this story, but I don't have my heroes make really stupid mistakes like flirt with other women when they shouldn't and
Right.
things like that. So just to give the heroine the excuse or the opportunity to forgive them, to intentionally like make that a theme in the story, I just couldn't do that. But forgiveness has been a huge challenge for me in my relationship with my husband. And I have not always forgiven him. And I noticed that we had a pretty rough period. And we weren't separated. We were separated by distance, because of moving and different things like that, but we weren't separated, as a couple. And I realized that I didn't want to be married anymore. And that shocked me. I was like, okay, and I've only told, well, my husband and one other person, but this is real life. So here you go, reader. And I realized that I was okay being day to day without him. And I realized that was a dangerous place to be.
Yes.
That he, the issues that we'd had were not grounds for biblical divorce. He'd been faithful. He's never abusive. That I didn't, when I looked back and went through all these things and that that I was upset about, they were all things I kept coming back to, but you should forgive him for that. But you
Mhm.
should forgive him for that. And I hadn't. And I got to a point where the person that I loved more than anyone at the beginning of our marriage, you throw in kids and it all just mixes together because you love your kids so much and love
Yes.
God so much. But I was like, I let this go and I had no emotional motivation or desire to fix my marriage other than it was the right thing to do. I knew that I was wrong and I wanted to give my kids a loving example. And so I just started praying that God would give me a love for my husband again. And I don't know, I think that the dedication to pray and to desire that is part of the characteristic of godly love and not the emotional element of love, which is also a beautiful thing. I lost the emotional element, but I was still devoted and willing to love, if that makes sense. And I was also at a point where like I knew the problem was me and that our marriage could still make it. There wasn't, other than my hardness of heart, there was no reason for our marriage not to make it. And so I did a lot of praying and a lot of we had to talk about those things. And so you get the feeling of like, well, now I'm just he's like, you're just bringing up the past and holding it over my head. And I'm like, if we have to address this, you are 100% right. I have not forgiven you, and that's why I'm bringing it up now. And it included counseling and um, just a willingness, though, for me to ignore my emotions and do what was right. I think emotions are important because they reflect what's happened and our values and a number of other things. But I knew that, I needed to take care of my marriage, and God did restore the love in my marriage. I think my husband and I are closer now than we have ever been. And I'm just so grateful that one, neither one of us made huge mistakes in our anger and our bitterness that would have been too much, in my opinion, in my personal growth, to um, to
To
for our
recover
marriage to
from. Yeah.
survive. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And so, having learned that very important lesson of forgiveness, I think it comes through in my stories because just like weaving the spiritual theme in with the romantic theme, it's something that I've learned and it's something that I've incorporated in my daily life. Like if I'm gonna forgive you for being late, and that sounds so petty, and I hate it when I say that. I just, I'm like, you are a spoiled brat, KyLee. But I'm late for my appointment. And, now everyone sees that I'm late to get to work and I'm going to be the person walking in, at the end or, late to our staff meeting, now I look bad and he doesn't care, just, I'm like, can't go down that road. Like, I'm going to forgive you for every tiny little thing. And, I think that that comes through in my writing. Definitely. And then all of my heroines and heroes, they're having to forgive one another constantly because they're very flawed, especially in the Outlaw Hearts series.
Well, first of all, thank you for sharing that because I know it's not easy to share our own mistakes. It's not easy to share the hard places we've been in, or we want people to look at us fondly and not to see the dark parts of our heart, but we all have them. So, first of all, thank you for sharing that and being raw and being vulnerable. But second, I love that you talked about how your emotions said one thing, but God said another. I think our feelings often lie to us. I was talking with my niece this morning, who is a new Christian, and she was asking me about how she doesn't feel God is as close to her as she did when she first came to know him. And she goes, I know he's still there, but I just don't feel him. And I said, honey, feelings lie to us all the time. We get these feelings, like you said, of I don't need to be married. I'm happy without him. That's a feeling. And those feelings are not always from God and they are not
Hmm.
always accurate. And so we have to be intentional, which is exactly what I told her in our relationship with God. If we're going to be close to him, we have to be intentional and draw close to him. And you're so right that it's the same in marriage. You have to be intentional. You have to choose to forgive. You have to choose to invest in your partner. You have to choose to go to counseling. You have to choose to
Yeah.
to bring those things into the light because the enemy wants to keep them in the dark and things fester and grow in the dark that shouldn't be there. And so we have to bring them out into the light. We have to address them. And I just love that you shared that with us. So thank you.
You're
Well, tell
welcome.
us what is next for you as a writer. Do you have any more love stories on the horizon?
Well, book three is have book three is coming out and it'll be out in March of the next year. It's called The Convict's Courtship, and it's pretty self-explanatory, I think, in the title. But some of my readers have commented on uh Bo. Bo is in book one and in book two, and so he makes some pretty big mistakes and has some things to overcome. And this is his love story, and it is set in a remote mining town. You have our heroine, Clara, is an aspiring journalist, and Bo is the reformed convict who saves his life, who saves her life. And it's snowy Virginia City, Nevada, on top of Mount Davidson. Just, I love it so much.
Very romantic. Very good. We are looking forward to reading Bo's story as well. KyLee, it's been so much fun chatting with you. Before we get into the part about our giveaway, could you tell our readers where they can find you online?
Yes. So the best place to find me is my website. It's KyleeWoodley.com. I have a newsletter you can sign up for there, and I send out monthly newsletters with updates and book deals. I also share like historical bits, things that I run across in my research that I just think are amazing and have to tell someone. So yeah, KylieWoodley.com. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook. I use them more for like, just fun stuff when I have something to share or book reviews because I do a lot of reading and but I would love to connect with readers about forgiveness, marriage, writing, just reading. I would love to connect at KylieWoodley.com.
Great. All right. Well, do you have a copy of your book handy?
I do.
Let's see that beautiful cover. Ah, I love it.
So pretty.
So, when I saw the cover, my eyes were first drawn to Aubrey's dress, the beautiful
Yeah.
dress and the lace around her collar. And so I made some earrings that are sort of inspired by her dress. So I'll show you the earring. Oh boy, the light,
The glare.
the glare.
So pretty.
Here we go. So
Aww.
the outside has the sort of greenish gray color of her dress, and then the inside is white with sort of almost like an opal kind of coloring to it. It's got like the scalloped edges like her collar. So
Aww.
this is the pair of earrings that our viewers and readers can win along with a copy of your book. All they have to do is like our giveaway post, follow us both on social media, and comment done beneath our post. That's all they have to do. And this is going live Monday, and we will pick a winner Wednesday night. So I want to thank you again for doing the interview, for telling us your own story, and for partnering with me on this giveaway. KyLee Woodley, so good to talk to you again.
Thanks, Heather. It's so much fun coming on your show, and I am happy to have the opportunity again.